The convergence of our voices is the song of our beauty. Many voices will speak here, the song woven through diverse notes. Hello and welcome, Eimear Burke, who is a storyteller and the chosen chief of the Order of Bards, Ovates and Druids. So first off, hello, and I would like to ask you about Druidry and women in Druidry, because it's often seen as a very male realm. So how do you feel that is either true or not true?
Well, anyway, delighted to be here chatting to you, Gail. So thank you so much for inviting me. Well, I suppose the stereotypical view is, white-haired men with long beards in white robes, and that's the kind of the stereotypical view of Druids. And I suppose when I was growing up, that was kind of it. But then in our mythology, Druids feature and female Druids. They've been there. So and it's funny that women have been everywhere in history, but they get little mentions. So the ones that shout the loudest are the guys, and they get all the attention. And I suppose, fortunately, within there's many ways I could go with this. So within OBOD, for the Order of Bards, Ovates and Druids, I think we're 50-50, or maybe more than 50% are women. And when Ross Nichols founded the order in 1964, there were three people at the top. He was one, the chosen chief, but the Pendragon was a woman and the scribe was a woman. So within the order, it's always been, the ethos has always been equal men and women. So it's never been an issue within the order.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm only the third chosen chief. So the first two were men and the third is a woman. So it doesn't seem to be an issue. Yet, we'll say the Roman accounts were of men, but then when the Romans came and their brief was to rid Britain of the Druids, and the last stronghold of the Druids was on Unismon, which is modern day Anglesey, and there were women Druids who, put up a last fight along with their male colleagues. So there are mentions of them, but somehow with the revival movement in Britain, they didn't seem to feature, and yet they're there. So when I look through the stories, I find plenty of evidence of women Druids being there. So how many there were, I have no idea in reality, but in the accounts, they are there, they are present.
Yeah, could you mention maybe a couple of the Druid women in some of the old stories?
Well, one of my favorites is Bogue. So in the Second Battle of Moytura, which is one very, very important story in our mythology, is where the Fomorians, Balor with the evil eye, is holding the Tuatha Dé Danann hostage and demanding tributes every year. And there is a mention in the story. So there's been a prophecy that Balor is going to be killed by his grandson. So it's decided he has a daughter who's a beautiful, kind, caring woman, completely different to her parents. And she's locked in a tower and looked after only by women, so that if she doesn't encounter a man, then the prophecy will not be fulfilled. And in the story, there's a mention of a little Druid woman called Bogue, who flies Cian over to Tory Island, where he meets Ethna. They spend the night together, and 9 months later, she gives birth to 3 babies. Balor finds out, throws them over the cliff into the sea, and they're wrapped up in a blanket together, tied with a pin. But the pin opens, and the first 2 babies fall into the sea, and the third one, Bogue, happens to be flying by, saves the third baby, and that's Lugh of the Long Hand, the great hero who saved the Tuatha Dé Danann by killing Balor of the Evil Eye. So it's like Lugh is the hero. He defeats the Fomorians. He saves Ireland. And there's 2 mentions of Bogue, but actually, so I tell it from her perspective. She ensured that he was conceived, and she saved his life. Two really, really, really key elements in that story, and she's only mentioned twice. So I tell that story from with Berogue's voice, and that's really, really important, because nothing would have ever happened without her, nor would anything have happened without Ethna, Lou's mother, of course. And so often mothers get written out of, they're incidental, but actually they're key. And then the other story is the story of Finn McCool and how he got the Emas, one of the three gifts of the Salmon of Wisdom. So his father was killed while his mother Myrna was pregnant with him. And his existence had to be kept secret. So his mother, unfortunately, wasn't able to keep him safe. So she handed him over to the care of a druidess, a druid, Bomil, and a warrior. Two wise women who looked after him in a secret location in the Slieve Blue Mountains in the centre of Ireland. And they were key to teaching him the art of warriorship, of hunting, of herb lore, star lore, stories, trees, really, really seminal women in terms of preparing him for his destiny.
Yeah, so we can
Again, there's only
find,
one mention. Again, they're
yes,
only mentioned in the story, but it's like,
yeah,
well, it's just a mention, but actually, if you go into the story and immerse yourself in the story, you're able to extract and distill all it was that those two women gave him.
yeah. And do you find that something you do a lot in your storytelling is extract a more female-centered telling?
Yes, I mean, in my version of that story, I also talk about Myrna, his mother, who visits him when he's 6 and he's asleep, and she sings all of her wisdom into him, because that's what she can't look after him, but she can prepare him for his destiny. And in a sense, as mothers who are willing mothers, I suppose, we want to sing our wisdom and knowledge into our children and give them as much as we can. And this she does. That's not mentioned in the story because it's much from a very patriarchal. Now she goes and visits him and sings, but I add, what would she have sung in addition to a lullaby? She would
Hmm.
have given everything she possibly could to her child. So it's just extracting and distilling and creating a larger picture, amplifying the story for it to make sense
Hmm.
and for it to be relevant for these times.
Yeah, yeah. And that's what happens to stories. They change over time according to the teller. So who knows what these stories were like 500 years ago?
I mean,
Yeah.
when you think of a reporter in modern times reporting on an event, you will only get what they tell you. And
Hmm.
and that will be one perspective. And particularly, we all look at the world through our own lenses and we have our own slant. Mine is looking at it from a perspective, female perspective. Others might say I'm being really, really biased, but I don't think I am because I'm never biased, of course. Uh,
And no more
but
biased than anybody else.
exactly, exactly. But when you look at the lenses through which anyone ever speaks or describes an event, we all have our own filters, and but it's important to be able to add another perspective, and that's what
Mhm.
I try to do, and also try to make it relevant for these times because you think, okay, those stories have been situated, 2,000 years ago.
Mhm.
Um, how relevant are they today? But I think, I know you tell African stories and uh, they come from a particular context, but you can see the universality of these stories, and
Mhm.
not just universality over geography, over place, but also I think over time.
Yeah. And speaking of the present time and your role as chosen chief, how do you see that role and what do you think you bring to it that's different?
Oh, I hate that question. The bit that's different. You mean okay, I start first. So I suppose, what's beautiful about the order is that the way it's organized, I do not have a management role. So I don't have to work with budgets, targets, plans. anything like that. I'm there as a spiritual leader, as a figurehead, which I suppose that is my gift. That is what I can do. If I had to manage an office and all of that stuff, that wouldn't be my thing at all. So it's there as as a figurehead. And what's really interesting, because my installation coincided with COVID, I had no idea. So anyway, June 2020 is when I took over. We made the announcement in 2018, and after 2018, people were emailing me and asking me, what was I going to change? What was going to be different about the order? And I remember thinking, I have no idea, because the order for me was not something that needed to be repaired. It wasn't a sick organization that I had taken over. Often, companies, things, a new manager comes in, or a CEO, and they have to rationalize and come up with a strategic plan, and everything has to be changed and fixed. And that was not that was not my experience of the order. That's not how I perceived it. So I suppose I had a concern initially, is that how was I going to follow Philip? A really hard act to follow, being a wonderful leader, for 32 years, a prolific writer, all of those kind of things that he has, and still contributes to the order. But what happened with OBOD, with COVID, is that, so my installation ceremony didn't happen in the physical plane as it should have, as it was planned in Glastonbury, but it was done over the ether, as it were, over the astral, in the astral plane. And Dave, our Pendragon, beautifully choreographed a ritual through recordings that we had been working on for months, chanting together. It was all done electronically, and we were working, but I hadn't heard the finished product until the day of the installation, sitting in my sitting room in the room next door. A very, very profound experience for me. And I had my family and friends with me, and they said, one who isn't a Druid said, I was there in that meditation. I was there in that circle. I could see everything happening. And that was really profound for him, but also for me to hear it. I found it very, very moving. And then I realized it was meant to happen this way. And of course, as Druids, we have an inner and an outer world, and we develop our inner grove and our inner world. And this is how I became initiated as chosen chief, was through the inner plane, which is really, really important. And I suppose doing our light body and our inner grove work as Druids, that it's important to be able to do that, so that no matter where you are in the world, be you in an apartment, with 4 plant pots for your grove, you can still do the work. And that was really important. And then people, someone suggests, can you not do more online? And I thought, how are we going to manage this? And then for the solstice in 2020, we had an online ceremony on was it StreamYard or Zoom? StreamYard, I think. Yes. And that went down a bomb. People said, oh, we need this to continue. So now we've been doing it ever since. So the online piece has really, really developed. And I couldn't have anticipated that it would work, because prior to COVID, I would have said no. Like, I now work as a psychologist. I see people online. I would have said, no, not appropriate. You can't do that. You can't do a ritual online. And I've discovered, yes, you can. And it can be very, very meaningful. So our online presence has grown. And that is something that's new to the order. Our rate of membership of people joining has doubled. And I don't think that's because of me, but I do think it's because Druidry is very relevant in these times. And when you think of the climate change and all of the things that are happening in the world, where people are craving for a spirituality that is meaningful for them, earth-based. But now it's accessible because of our online community. So we have many members. Are you in Canada or the US?
I switch between both. Right now, I'm in the US.
You're in the US. Okay. So many of our members in the US haven't met another Druid, and maybe cannot come out to their family or their work situation or their community, because depending on where they live. So the online community has been a lifeline. So many of our members say, this is my lifeline. This is the first time I've been at a Druid ceremony, being on an online one. So like, we have our online Lunasa ceremony coming up this Saturday, we've had meetups online, and now with our hearth, we have a climate listening circle, we have a mental health group listening, we have a death cafe. I'm going to set up a storytelling one in the autumn. So many ways of meeting. And now we have that beautiful hub so that it's for a safe space without any advertising or aggro and all of that to create that community. Now, having said that, I had nothing to do with the development of the hearth. My little brain wouldn't go far enough to be able to conceive of that, but it is a wonderful development. So I suppose it's our numbers have increased, but our sense of community has come tighter. One of those ironic things, as the numbers get bigger, it's not that the community sense of community is dissipated, but because of the online capabilities, there's that sense of coming together in a greater way than before. I don't know if I've answered your question.
Yeah, I think so. So basically your role is guide, maybe, spiritual guide. No.
Yes, in one way, but the thing about the teachings of the order is that you're provided with teachings in each of the grades, and it's always like, if this feels right for you, you might like to try this exercise or this meditation, and then you're asked to reflect on it and how it has worked for you. There's no teachings in the sense that there's no dogma, so we've no rules and no regulations and no kind of sense of sins and how we should be. So in the sense that as a guide, it's not that I'm guiding people to do the right thing and stay on the straight and narrow Druid path through the forest. It doesn't work that way. But it's around allowing people, and maybe this is where the guidance comes in, is to find their own feet and their own roots on their Druidic path. And that means that because ours is a very diverse forest. So, you can be an animist, a pagan, an atheist, a Christian, a Muslim, a Hindu, a Buddhist, and a Druid. Many of our members will have left their primary spiritual path, sometimes in anger, and say it was too restrictive and I'll never ever go back to that. And now I've found Druidry and I am an animist, pagan, whatever it is, and this is wonderful for me. And then we've other members who go, no, I still value some of the teachings or the values of that, and I'm going to bring it in and weave it in with my Druidry. And that is something that is really, really important, is that we welcome diversity. So be you, regardless of, race, creed, color, gender, whatever it is, that ours is a melting pot, which makes it a very, very healthy place to be, because diversity, forests, the world survives on diversity, not on homogeneity. And I like to describe the order as a salad. It's not a puree. So a salad allows you, whatever color your leaf is, or the texture, whether you have nuts and seeds or whether you have fish or meat or cheese or nothing like that in. The salad there has lots of crunchy, interesting textures, where a puree is we're all blended and we all need to kind of seem the same. Now, I'm not against purees, by the way, but it's as a metaphor, that welcoming that diversity and that hopefully freedom of expression. And often there's an edge there, because, if you and I have different views, are we strong enough and mature enough to be able to recognize, yes, I don't agree with you, but I recognize your right to have that view, or I welcome hearing your view and you likewise welcoming mine. And it might be challenging and it might make me feel a little uncomfortable that you're saying something that might be, but you know what? It gets me thinking, and I might be able to shift my perspective in some small way. And then, of course, being in a grove together, I think the idea is that I want to reach out to you, and I hope you want to reach out to me. And that somehow, even with our differences and even with the crunchiness, maybe the edginess, that somehow we can still stand in circle in a grove and meet as two individuals, finding the meeting points, the similarities, but also respecting the differences. And that's a challenge.
Yeah.
And in this world, with all our social media intolerance and sensitivities, to be able to meet and welcome and genuinely welcome diversity, which means even welcoming the views that we don't agree with, but being
Hmm.
able to manage them. And that's a hard one. That is not easy.
Yeah. Hmm. And you were spent some time in Africa,
I did.
and can you tell us where that was and what sort of spiritual learnings perhaps that you got while you were there?
Well, when I was 4, so I was brought up by nuns, Roman Catholic nuns, and Sister Cecilia was a missionary nun in Sierra Leone, and she'd come every few years and show us films and hands up who's going out to Africa. So I always had my hand up. There was 2 things I was going to do. I was going to be a doctor and go to Africa. Didn't do the doctor bit. I was too lazy, but I did go to Africa, and that was to save the world. And I have to say, I failed. Anyway, I went out as a nurse, and I was doing kind of primary health care, and I would have been very compliant, a good girl, uh, not religious because I became an agnostic at 9 years of age, but I did toe the line. And I became interested in Indigenous healing while I was in Kenya. I worked in a desert in the north of Kenya called Turkana. And our watchman was very, very interested in herbs. So he told me about a lot of herbs, and I never got to meet a healer then. So then I came back, I did psychology, and I went to Lesotho. I met my first husband in Kenya, and then we went to Lesotho together. And then I became involved in a healing and meditation group and working with Indigenous healers. And that was fascinating. And for me, it was great because I was very, very skeptical about anything about the other world, about divination, or what you would call, maybe for want of a better word, superstitions. And here I found a place that I could actually, explore this. I can take another look at this. And then I came back and I did a master's in counseling psychology, and I went back to Africa again. I started teaching in Tanzania, and I became very friendly with a traditional healer and had initiations with him. And Howard and I worked, videoed his work and presented at conferences, and that was absolutely fascinating. And then he came for a number of summers here to Ireland, and we ran workshops together. And I was just blown away by this. And for many years we'd go and, meet different Indigenous healers. And I think, and I'd also done work with a medicine woman from the US, from the Cree tradition. Again, blown away by all of this, but one frustration was it wasn't from my land. I was close enough, certainly not the American one, because I've only been to it, dipped into America, but not been there enough. Africa, yes, I spent a lot of time there, but still it wasn't mine. And Shaban, my friend, and I were in a bookshop in Ireland, and then this book hopped out, The Modern Day Druidess by Cassandra Eason. And she mentions, you can be a druid in a city. And I thought, I like that, because then it's achievable. And she mentioned OBOD at the back of the book and said that she had done her training with OBOD, but she was a solitary druid and she preferred to keep it that way. And I thought, okay, I don't want to be with the group either. So I went online, clicked, and became a member. And as soon as I had done the introductory pack, I couldn't wait to sign up for the course. And it was about 7 years before I actually went to an OBOD gathering. But I started here holding ceremonies, thanks to Shaban. He said, you've been given a key now. So I joined in August. So I was given, in the first year, you get you get your 8 rituals corresponding to the time of year that you start. And mine was the autumn equinox, and we were running a workshop that weekend, the 3 of us, Howard, Shaban, and I. Howard was my second husband, and we thought, we'll do this because it was on the equinox. And he said, you've been given a key, use it, and you strengthen and generate the energy in this place that you have. Otherwise, the key will go rusty. So in a sense, he gave me permission, because I wouldn't have thought I had any permission. I'm 10 minutes inside the order, and I'm doing 10 minutes a bard, and I'm doing ceremonies. And I did, and that was 21 years ago. And the rest is history. So it was a wonderful path and a wonderful way. And so for 20 years, I taught in Tanzania, and I was always there for Imulk. And I would do the Imulk ceremony there, which is a bit weird, but my Tanzanian friends would join me. And it's almost like, no, this isn't the beginning of spring. It's the hot time of summer. But as I traveled, and because of Druidry, my roots got deeper in this land. And it restored my love of Irish. It brought my Irish language back to me. So Druidry has been a great gift to me as a person living here. And thanks to my experiences both in Africa and finding OBOD, all of those are all very, very much intertwined. And of course, African nature, African worldviews or cosmologies are very, very much in line with Druidic ones. The colors and textures are different. But, honoring nature, honoring the four directions. The elements might be rearranged differently, but it doesn't matter. It's the principles are the same, and how it's expressed are different. But we understand that connection with ancestors, with land, spirit of place, nature, the elements, the directions, all of that are really, and the importance of ritual and the importance of community, and how all of those interact together to help us, I suppose, achieve wholeness.
Okay. So while you're here, do you have anything else you'd like to speak about?
Oh, I don't know. I hadn't thought of
I
that.
throw these questions at people, leave them stumped.
I think Druidry for me is very much an earth-based, grounded spiritual path. And I think it's very, very important to remain grounded in order to be able to fly, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Having an anchor rooted in the land, then you can go off and journey to the other world. I remember when I started on this spiritual path, I wanted to be flying everywhere. And someone says, no, you need to come back down. I go, I want to be up there. And actually I realize, no, keep your 2 feet firmly on the ground. When you have roots, when you're rooted, then you're home.
Yeah.
And I would say that no matter where you are in the world, even if you're in so-called occupied land, you need to find your roots. Otherwise, you're floating around. You need to make your peace with the spirit of the land and where you live. However you do that, that is your own journey. But I think it's yours. No one can take that from you. I think that's really, really important, that you allow yourself make peace with the land and the spirits of the place in which you find yourself. And like you move, I mean, I know you're born in London, you move between Canada and the US. And I don't know how you manage your roots.
Yeah, it's a little bit tricky. I think I still feel English roots, but then I'm definitely feel connected to the land in Canada, and
Yeah.
especially Western Canada. It just feels good. Yeah.
And again, my like was I could feel at home in Africa. So it's like, oh my God, I'm at home here. And it's so different to where Ireland is, And
Yeah.
I'm at, Canada is so different to your own background in the UK. And it's about being able to, and I don't know, it's not necessarily an ancestral connection. Maybe it's a past life connection. Why? Because I'm Irish, or maybe if you go back, we all came from Africa, but that's maybe a little bit too far back. But why does a land speak to your soul if you don't have any, we say, ancestry or bloodlines going back there? What is it? There's another dimension that where the land can sing to your soul.
Yeah, it's true. And so I think that's a good note to end on. So thank you so much for talking on this Crone Chronicles.
Great
And
title.
yeah, thanks. Okay. And yeah, so bye to everyone. I hope you enjoyed listening.